Now, here are Morgan Streetman and Roxanne Wilder.
Well, hello. Good to be here on this Monday. This is my favorite Monday of the year. Do you know why?
You got some sleep this
I got
weekend.
that extra hour. I loved it. Yes, so happy. And in case you don't know, right now it is 10 o'clock, 10 a.m.
10 a.m.
Mm-hmm, not 11 a.m.
It was crazy because I sat there and I'm watching my phone as I'm surfing, and it says 1:59. Then it goes to 2 a.m., but it goes back to 1 a.m.
So you were up for the change.
I was up for the change, not intentionally, but just, couldn't go to sleep.
But our biological clock's still the same.
Yeah.
I normally get up around 3:30, 2:30.
Mm-hmm. Well, that does happen.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
You know what I did? I don't change my clock in my car for as long as I humanly can. And then when I'm driving to work in the morning, it feels like, it's only 6 a.m. This isn't so bad.
Yeah.
So we do what we can. I'm sorry. Pat George is miserable. He hates this time change.
I don't like it at all. I went to bed last night at 5:15 because it was dark.
Ooh.
I thought it was 9 o'clock.
That's why you woke up so early.
Well, a little bit of a joke. I went a little
Yes.
later, but I don't like the darkness. I love when the evenings you go home and you sit around and you watch a little bit of the sunset, and it's 7:15 still, 7:30.
Well, you can do that in 4 months.
Hopefully it'll go by fast. I've been waiting all week for this show.
Oh, yeah? There's a lot going on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, exciting stuff. I don't know if y'all were keeping up at all with Brexit last week, but, we talked a lot about that on the show last week.
We got to take a quick look back.
Yeah, and as we predicted, they actually did go ahead and vote for an election, and that election scheduled for December 12th in the UK. Now, some interesting stuff going on there, and we don't want to get into too much of the detail because I don't think a lot of folks are interested in the granular level detail. But, you've got the Conservative Party they call the Tories, and that's the one that Boris Johnson's the head of. But they've also got this new Brexit party that Nigel Farage is leading up. And the two of them are trying kind of to get together. But one of the interesting things that happened more recently is the Tories, the Conservative Party, said that they are now setting aside the idea of a no-deal Brexit, that they will not accept a no-deal Brexit. They want the deal that they worked out with the European Union, which they brought to Parliament, in the last couple of weeks. Well, what's interesting about that is Nigel Farage, who's kind of the leader, he was the leader of the UKIP party, the UK Independence Party over there, and now he's kind of the leader of this new Brexit party, and he's one of the ones who led the whole referendum effort to vote on the Brexit referendum and get the UK out of the EU. He says the deal that Boris Johnson has brought back from the EU is basically a non-Brexit Brexit, that they're still going to be tied in really heavily with the EU in ways that at least Nigel Farage finds unacceptable. So we got an interesting short. I mean, it's amazing how they call for an election, and it's in like a month. You know what I mean? Wouldn't that be nice if we did that in the U.S.? Instead we're campaigning. I mean, how long have they been campaigning for the nomination so far? And
3.5 years.
Yeah. I mean, it never stops.
That and impeachment, you can't get anything done.
God. Oh, it's just, and of course, we're going to talk about all that.
What do
today.
you think personally, Morgan Streetman, about Brexit and the EU? What do you think should happen?
I think it's a complex issue. I think that there were a lot of benefits to Europeans, and Britons included in that, at being part of the customs union and being able to have the freedom of movement. Anybody who's traveled over Europe in the last 20 years or so, the freedom of movement was great because you could just go from country to country. There was essentially no borders, no checks, etc. At the same time, there were some real downsides to it, I think, and that's because the European Union operates many times through unelected bureaucrats and regulators. So they've got these regulators operating from Brussels, making rules, and the rules have to be applied all across the European Union equally. So that means the rules apply in England, and they apply in Germany, and they apply in Portugal, and they apply everywhere equally. But not everybody thinks about things in the same way.
Especially when you have all those different cultures.
Yeah, they're very different cultures, just like we have here. We've got the South, and we've got the Northeast, and we've got the West Coast. And one of the nice things about our country having the separate states, the federal system, with the states having, at least supposed to be having, a lot of the power, is that you can kind of set up different regulation schemes in different areas as the people that live there want them to be. And so you've got some variability. But over there, it all has to be the same. And I think that's a little bit of a recipe for disaster. And so a lot of the regulations that were coming down from Brussels were offensive to people in the UK, particularly working class people, and they didn't want them in their country. And unfortunately, with the way that system was set up, that wasn't an option. So I see both sides of it, really, with the Brexit thing. Overall, my position is that the people voted to leave. I think they have to respect that vote. To me, that's really important. If they voted to leave, then they have to leave. That's important. Now, forget are there benefits to being in the EU, et cetera? Yeah, there are. But you know what? The people voted to leave. Overall, they won out. They had a referendum. There was a huge campaign for it. This has been going on for years, and they need to honor that vote, in my opinion. Even if it means that, there are some things that we lose that we consider to be benefits, and there are some problems that come from it. Well, that's what it means to let the people be in charge, as opposed to the government bureaucrats being in charge. And in my mind, the better place for power in the world to reside is with the people. That's the system we have set up here, or that's supposed to be set up here.
I was going to say, it sounds like you're talking about us.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, to me, if we lose that, then we're just one more step toward the old system, which is the divine right of kings, where the king is an absolute monarch, or maybe the queen, depending on what country you might be in. But there's a monarch who's absolute, and the idea is that the monarch's power comes directly from God. Now, you could flip this around, and you could go with the communist ideology, and in those situations, there's a monarch or an oligarchy. There's a group of monarchs, and their power is absolute. And where does their power come from? Well, in their minds, it doesn't come from God. It comes from being in charge of the state. And in the communist system, the socialist system, the state is God. It's the highest moral authority that there exists in the universe in their minds. Now, I don't think that's actually true, but that's in their minds. So no matter where it comes from, you're being ruled over, whether it's coming from the power of the state or allegedly from God through the power of the state. You're being ruled over. But what our experiment was about here in the U.S., and we really were the bulwark. We were the change something like this had not existed before, as far as we're aware, in the history of the world. A representative republic like what was set up in our country. We were the first, and we were the absolute pinnacle of the Enlightenment thinking. Our country's system of government, I think our Constitution is, one of the best documents, one of the most impressive thought processes to come from the Enlightenment. Now, did we still have problems? Absolutely. I mean, we still had the slavery issue that I think a lot of the Founding Fathers were conflicted over. I mean, certainly now the only one to actually free his slaves is one of my very personal favorites, which is George Washington. Mm-hmm. When he passed away, he actually freed all his slaves, but he was the only one to do it. But many of them were very conflicted about the idea of slavery. And I think that overall slavery was a black mark on the founding of our country. And I'm glad that we've moved away from that. Now, that's also a very complicated issue because slavery wasn't like we started slavery or we set it up. It was kind of a necessity when the country started, and it was provided for us by a lot of northeastern shippers and a lot of particularly British and Dutch slave traders. So, they worked together to bring the slaves over and sell them into the South where cheap labor was needed at the time if they were going to, what is the right word, kind of do what they needed to do down there, grow all these crops and which was the cotton and everything else. There weren't people who were otherwise willing to go down there and do that. So it's a very complicated issue, but I'm glad that we're past all that, and I'm sorry to see that even in this day and age that we're still kind of struggling with some of those feelings among each other, that we've still got a lot of negative feelings towards each other because it seemed to me like we had at least somewhat gotten past some of that earlier in this century, but that's kind of cropped back up. Now, with respect to the Brexit, I think it's going to be very interesting. I can't wait to see what happens on 12 December. And, if they get out as they're supposed to, it should be by the end of January of next year. So we'll see if that happens, although there's already been talk about moving it back yet again to next summer. And so maybe it'll be the never-ending Brexit workout that we end up facing. I wanted to take just a quick second and talk about our local interest story, and that is that here in the Sunshine State, we're going to be having a new permanent resident soon, right? Our president, Donald Trump, is apparently going to be moving his residence from New York down to Mar-a-Lago, Florida. So that's some exciting news for the state of Florida. And if you look at any of the recent news articles on movement within this country, I mean, our state is getting so many people moving to it from the Northeast. It's unbelievable how many people are coming down here because of the taxes, because of the weather, because of the economic opportunity that we have in Florida, and not the overbearing regulations. And we may even talk some about some of those overbearing regulations as we go.
And we have some good governors to thank for that.
We absolutely do. Well, stick around. We've got a lot more to discuss. We'll be right back on the Morgan Streetman Show.
Woo, and we're back on the Morgan Streetman Show, and we were just catching up off air. Pat, you knew this. I went to the Bahamas this weekend. I was just telling Morgan, we took a little trip there, the what do you call it, baby moon before the baby comes. But because we had our daughter with us, it didn't really feel like one. It felt like more of Doug's golf trip and my nannying trip. Shh, didn't say that. Hopefully he's not listening right now.
Hopefully he's working hard right now.
Yeah. No, we had a good time, though. But it was interesting because you go through customs. And this particularly stood out in my mind because my daughter, you know, that you have all those ropes that keep people in the security lines. And we follow those as adults because we're adults and that's the process. And she is not intimidated by these ropes because she's shorter than them. And she busted right through and ran all the way through to the customs desk and got to chase her down. In any case, embarrassing story there. But I just was thinking while I'm going through customs, this is a process.
Yeah.
We're American citizens. We go take a trip to the Bahamas. We have great relations with the Bahamians. Or we come back to the United States. You have to do all of this. You have to have your passports. You have to. It doesn't just happen because you want it to happen and you snap your fingers. And so when we talk about open borders, and we were just referring to it with Brexit, and now we have this issue obviously ongoing within our own country. Why is a process not honored?
Why would anybody expect open borders?
Right.
I mean, we don't go to other countries and expect open borders.
Right. Certainly not.
I mean, only John McAfee would do that, right? You know, go into another country without going through customs. I mean, we all have to follow the rules and pass through customs. And, you know, something that's personally kind of was offensive to me, you know, several years ago when I desperately wanted to move to Costa Rica, and I still want to move to Costa Rica. But when I desperately wanted to move there several years ago and open up like a hotel down there, you know, I looked into that. And the truth is, if you're not a citizen of Costa Rica, which takes you about 6 or 7 years if you just move there and go through the process, then you cannot work down there. And they will report you. The Costa Rican people don't like it when foreigners come there and work because you're, in their mind, you're taking a job away from a Costa Rican. Okay, they will report you, and the police will come, and they will arrest you, and they will deport you.
I bet.
And how come that happens in Costa Rica when we as Americans want to go there? Or let's say we wanted to move for some god-awful reason to Mexico, and there are nice parts of Mexico. I shouldn't be so hard on Mexico. But, you know, you've seen some of what's happened in Mexico lately, and it just, again, demonstrates the fact that Mexico is a failed state, you know, where they captured El Chapo's son. And then they had to let him go because the cartel gunmen started shooting up the town and took a whole bunch of military and police officers hostage and were going to just kill them all and kill their families. So they basically overpowered the Mexican military there. And there's probably a lot of reasons that happened, but not to get off too much on that tangent. But the point is, if you wanted to move to Mexico or Guatemala or Belize or Costa Rica or whatever, they're not just going to let you move down there and start working down there without going through their process. So how come it is when those people or any people want to come to the United States, they have an expectation that there should be no process, that they should just be allowed to come in and waltz right in? I don't understand it. You know, some interesting stories, and this kind of ties in with several things because I saw an interesting story in the Washington Post, and I think it's really a pretty suspect story, but they were doing a story on the fact that, and there's one interesting point here, and that is the wall is being built right now. The wall is actually being built because the Washington Post, much though they hate that, did a story about sections of the new wall. And, of course, the whole story was about how you can, with $100 of power tools, you can just cut through the sections of the new wall. And by the way, that's a little bit disturbing in one way. But, you know, I saw a friend of mine, and in fact, one of the listeners on this show had posted some things on Facebook about that. And he said he bets that the Washington Post not only gave them the power tools, but told them exactly where to go to. And it is a little suspect that the Washington Post would have had all those great pictures of the wall being cut through. I mean, how did they know where it was to get there in time? I mean, this had to have just happened, right? Because the wall just started getting built. But they claim that with a little reciprocating saw that you could pick up at, Harbor Freight for $50 or something, and some special blades that you can actually cut through these, what do they call them, bollards or whatever that they got. And that's what the wall's made out of, these steel bollards that attach kind of down at the base to concrete and up at the top to a big steel plate. Now, if you remember, of course, originally President Trump wanted to build a solid concrete wall. And now that we see that they're cutting through maybe fairly easily through these bollards, maybe there was some sense to building a solid wall. Now, at Customs and Border Patrol's request, President Trump switched to the wall that has space between the bollards so that they could see through it. And frankly, that does make some sense because you wouldn't want to be walking on one side of that wall and not know on the other side there were guys who could be throwing rocks at you or maybe launching mortars or something else, and you couldn't even see them that they were preparing to do that. So I get the idea of wanting to be able to see through the wall and that being of some benefit. But, I just thought it was very interesting that the Washington Post is right there on scene. They know all about this cutting through the wall. They know what tools are used. They know exactly where this is going on. And they got the photographs. And this is all to try to tell you, the American people, that see, we told you so. See, we told you walls don't work. You people are stupid. You thought you could build a wall and keep people out? And that's kind of the game they want to play with it. And, I think that's a little bit sad. But fundamentally, we can just go back to the fact that why do people believe that they ought to be able to just come into our country without going through a process, without applying? Why do they think that's right? And maybe they don't think it's right. Maybe they just think, look, I don't care if it's right or wrong. It's just a reality. I need to get out of my own country or want to get out of my own country for one reason or another. I heard that you guys up there have a bunch of money and you're giving away a bunch of free stuff. And dadgummit, I'm coming to get some. Right, I'm coming to get some free stuff.
ID is not very important. Come on in and vote, too. You don't need ID.
Right. Why would you need an ID to vote?
Try to go down to Costa Rica and not have any identification.
It's crazy. It's the crazy. I mean, we're living in an insane world where we're being told things by our own media, and obviously they're working against us. They're working against the American people, and they're working against common sense. And a whole bunch of us don't buy into it. A whole bunch of us don't believe it. But, there's a whole group that does, and they just won't stop talking about it. And we're going to talk about some of that group because, there's been some stuff going on with some of the political aspects of what's going on in our country, particularly people running for the Democrat nomination. I don't know if you saw, but Beto has dropped out of the race. A single tear rolled down my cheek. No, he'll never give up, right? Because remember, he was born for this. He was made for this. This is his time. Well, somehow it didn't work out. And I also don't know if you've caught, but I tell you in the polls, Mayor Pete has really shot up in the polls.
I saw that.
Have you noticed that? Mm-hmm. Well, because I think he's the only alternative to, look at who else they've got. Elizabeth Warren, she is absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. Very smart lady.
John Legend's endorsement.
Oh, there you go.
She was thrilled about that.
I like to take all my political direction and advice from John Legend.
Biden's starting to take her on a little bit. I can't wait for the next debate. Biden is starting to beat her up a little bit.
I really don't feel bad for Joe Biden, but he is embarrassing himself. The gaffes, and we've played a lot of them for you here on this show, but the gaffes just keep coming. He was another one I was going to talk about. He can't even remember where he is. Now, come on, if you're running for president, what's the two most important states to begin with? New Hampshire and Iowa, right? Those are the first two. Those were historically, they've always been the most important, the first two. Now, they're very small states, and they don't give you a lot of electoral votes, but they kind of have an outsized influence because they're the first. But he's in Iowa, and he's talking about being in Ohio. Come on.
Iowa, Ohio. I guess a lot of vowels in both states.
I get it. I do get it. But you know what it is it's you can't be making gaffes like that over and over and over again because people are going to start to get the idea that maybe you're not all there, Uncle Joe. Creepy Uncle Joe. Maybe you're not all there. And then what he did in Des Moines was he's up in front of the crowd. This is Iowa, obviously, Des Moines, Iowa. He's up in front of the crowd, and he literally turns his back on the crowd. He keeps talking. He's giving his little speech, and he turns his back to face the screen behind him. I mean, come on, this is like, this is public speaking 101. You don't turn your back on your audience. Now, I've heard people say, oh, well, there were some people sitting behind him, and he was trying to turn and talk to them. And I haven't heard anybody say it, but if you ever watch one of President Trump's rallies, he turns around a lot. Now, he doesn't do it while he's talking typically. He turns around to kind of like receive applause from the crowd behind him and point at people and clap for himself and things like that. I mean, if you've never watched a President Trump rally, it's really something to be seen. He is the most masterful when it comes to managing media and television and the cameras of anybody in the field right now. But, here we are at the end of the second segment. You can see my sheet. We haven't even got through what I had for the first segment because the next thing I kind of wanted to get into was Elizabeth Warren's plan for Medicare for all, or what I would call Medicaid for all. And believe me, that's what you're going to get, and it's probably not even going to be that good. But, we're going to tell you what, she finally put a price tag on it. And you're not going to believe this price tag. It's unbelievable, the price tag. And then she's got her plan, because remember what Mayor Pete said, she's got a plan for everything. That's her signature, thing, is that she has a plan for every single issue. She's got a plan for how she thinks she's going to pay for it. And let me tell you this is coming out of your pocket. If you're within the sound of my voice, don't think you're getting away from this. This is coming out of your pocket. We'll tell you all about that when we come back.
Here we are in the Morgan Streetman Show, solving life's problems on air and off air, Morgan.
Well, we were having some fun talking about the whole social media conundrum and all the things that it's doing to change the way that we interact with each other, the way that we present ourselves, etc. I saw some poll that put Tampa at one of the tops of the lists and it wasn't at the very top, but maybe the top 5 for millennials. And one of the measures of whether or not the city was a good city or not is quote-unquote Instagrammability, okay, which I guess means your ability to take a neat Instagram photo there. And I thought, wow. I mean, think about what you used to worry about, 20, 30 years ago. I mean, how is traffic? How are the services? Now it's like, does the city have great places where you could take selfies of yourself in front of and look really cool in front of your friends? That's the most important thing. That's how I picked my city where I want to live. Where can I get some photos?
Some people out there probably have given up all of that and are having a great life.
I'll tell you what.
We're entertaining doing that right now.
Oh, really?
I'm getting close. I'm getting really close.
Nothing. No Instagram, no Facebook, no Twitter, nothing.
Go ahead.
Do you have that friend who isn't on any of that? And when you catch up with them, you feel so authentic?
I do.
I love those friends.
The guy who's come in here and he's been a guest on our show, and he actually hosted our show one day, which is E.B. Tucker. He's not on social media.
Really?
Yeah.
He seems so relaxed.
He's so relaxed. And you know what? He's so engaged. He reads a lot of books. He's really smart. I mean, he's fun to talk to. Mm-hmm. He can still have conversations. I mean, I have to tell you that when I have a conversation with somebody, they can't even explain what they're trying, whatever thought it is that they're having.
They just think in pictures.
They have to show me their phone. It's like, well, let me show you what I mean here. Look at this, or look at this video, or look at this picture. And it's like, why don't you just talk to me? I'm right here. Just summarize it for me. Tell me what it says. Well, okay, now speaking of telling you what it says, Medicaid for all. Elizabeth Warren's plan. I promised you we were going to get to giving you the price tag on that. And her plan, she's finally come out with it. And remember, this has been a feature of the debates. Is this going to raise taxes on the middle class? And she says, the way I like to look at it is for the middle class and normal people, costs are going to go down. And for anybody else, costs are going to go up. Remember that whole answer she kept giving? Well, apparently she finally put pen to paper and figured it all out. And the price tag, and let me promise you something. This price tag is low. I guarantee you this price tag is low by probably 50% or more. It's probably going to be even double this price tag when she gets done with it. $52 trillion. Trillion with a T. $52 trillion over 10 years. That is absolutely insane. That's insane. Do you know what our GDP is? Every year, it's only about 20 or 21 trillion a year. So she's talking about we're going to spend a quarter of our GDP on that, on Medicaid for all. I mean, it just, and by the way, her plan to pay for it, this is a great plan. She's going to hike $20 trillion, now this again, over 10 years, $20 trillion in taxes on who? On the top 1%, on employers, on evil corporations.
And that's why you have to demonize corporations so that everybody buys into all of this.
Yeah, but come on, guys. This is simple economic reality. You guys know what happens, don't you? You tax these employers. What are they going to have to do?
Try to rent a moving van right now. You can't get one because all the millionaires and billionaires have rented them already. They're all gone.
They're going to Costa Rica.
You can't get a moving truck.
And they've got a lot of stuff to move.
Right. This is going to be a huge jobs killer. You cannot jack the taxes up on these corporations. You think where are they going to get the money to pay for it? They're going to have to start cutting jobs, and it's going to be a downward spiral because as they cut jobs and benefits and other things, I mean, they're going to begin to not be able to produce as much. So now they're not going to make as much. I mean, taxes are going to strangle. I remember an old phrase from when I was coming up in the libertarian and conservative thought movement, and that is the power to tax is the power to destroy. And that is so true. The power to tax is the power to destroy. And if you want to destroy corporations and you want to destroy employers, then saddle them with $20 trillion of new taxes over the next 10 years. Do that and see what happens. Because, people think they have a right to these different things. I have a right to health services. I have a right to food. I have a right to a living wage. I have rights. Well, guess what? What happens when there's no business around to employ you? Who's going to give you your living wage? I guess it's going to be Andrew Yang's gang. They're going to say, just take some money. Here, we're just going to give you money. But don't you understand that this is going to cause the entire economic order to break down? It's going to cause the entire system of supply and demand that regulates how we interact with each other economically. It's going to destroy it. It's going to mean money is not worth anything. It's monopoly money. It's fake money. So what's going to happen? You give everybody an extra $1,000 a month or give them an extra $10,000. What does it matter? I mean, why stop there? Why are you being so cheap, Andrew Yang? Why only $1,000? Why don't you give them $1 million a month?
If any of those candidates ever said everybody is going to pay their fair share, you think they'd be elected?
Well, that's what they like to say, that fair share. What does that mean? Everything. That's your fair share. Open your wallet. We'll take it all.
The more you have, the more we'll take.
That's it. Now, I read some other interesting statistics because, guys, I just want you to think about this. Everything that government touches, it destroys. It destroys it. Every industry it touches. So we're talking about destroying our entire healthcare system in this country. And we've already done a pretty good job. We're probably 80% of the way there already with all of the government regulations and with the Affordable Care Act, which isn't affordable and nobody cares. That's, so now, remember when they were trying to pass the Affordable Care Act and they were like, well, you're going to have to pass it to find out what's in it. And, oh, by the way, we're going to pass it, and it's not really going to take effect for 4 or 5 years because we need to get the insurance companies a whole bunch of money on the front end because they're about to really get taken advantage of on the back end, et cetera, et cetera. And what winds up happening is we all wind up paying more. And we don't just wind up paying more for our premiums, but now when we go to actually use our health insurance, what's called alleged health insurance, your deductible's like $5,000. Remember when your deductible was like $500 or $1,000, something that you could actually hope to hit on a yearly basis?
$10,000.
Yeah, well, now the deductibles you can't even get to them. So what's the point of even having the insurance? Now, one of the interesting statistics that I read as part of this is that there are currently 87 million Americans who are uninsured or without adequate health insurance. Now, I remember when they were talking about the Affordable Care Act and they were talking about how many uninsured Americans we had, and it was in like the 20 to 30 million people range. So how have we tripled that number? We're now at almost 90 million people, almost a third of our country doesn't have adequate health insurance or are uninsured. So you're telling me that the government has fixed something? You're telling me that the Affordable Care Act has helped people, has done anything good for us? No, it hasn't, because everything the government touches, it destroys. Why? Because they are a monopoly. They don't have a profit motive. You've got a bunch of unelected bureaucrat regulators who are in charge, and they're not responsible to make a profit or else they go out of business like a normal business is, and there's no competition. It's not like you can say, I don't want to be a part of that. No, whether you like it or not, you're going to be stuck in the Medicaid for all system. It's going to be terrible. I'm telling you. And I don't. By the way, I don't think there's any chance the lying Pocahontas Warren, I almost called her Liawatha, but the lying Pocahontas Warren has a shot at getting elected president. I mean, I just pray for that. If she gets elected president, I may have to move and do the Morgan Streetman show remotely from somewhere else, because this country is going to be absolutely destroyed.
In 6 years, Costa Rica will let you in.
For now, I guess I'll have to move to Belize or something. This country is going to be absolutely destroyed by these stupid, wrong-headed communist and socialist policies that they want to put in place, including Medicaid for all and the Green New Deal. By the way, I also saw the price tag on the Green New Deal is almost $100 trillion over 10 years. I mean, what are these people thinking? And by the way, when they get rid of gasoline engines, how are we going to do any commerce? How are we going to ship goods across the country? How's your Amazon truck going to show up at your front door? Hello?
Algae.
Well, that's right. They'll just will a new technology into existence by force of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's willpower. Not only will you not be allowed to Instagram around her neighborhood in New York because she doesn't want you there, and that's in some of the articles we've looked at, but now she's going to will into existence a new algae-based, non-polluting electrical engine or something like that.
You know, they are working on that.
Well, and they should be. I mean, it would be great to find another technology other than, fossil fuels. I think it would be fantastic to find another way to run an engine to create energy. I would love to see us come up with some kind of 0-point energy technology. I just say, look, to date, if we have come up with it, it's been bought up by the oil companies and suppressed, okay, if we've come up with it. But as far as I'm aware, we haven't actually come up with a working technology that can replace the internal combustion engine at this time.
What happened to that peanut oil idea that was out? The cooking oil.
That. Mm-hmm.
That was so strong a few years back, and all of a sudden it disappeared.
Yeah, I remember seeing that. People would be going, the biofuels and stuff. Yeah, I remember seeing that. And what exactly happened with that? I mean, look, what happens to your car? I mean, did you see your gas mileage go down when they started putting 10% ethanol on everything? You know why they got that special gas pump there for you to use to get tool fuel, to get fuel for your riding lawnmower and your weed eater and stuff like that? Because you can't put that ethanol crud in there. It cruds up the engine. That's what it does, because it's not an efficient fuel source. So,
that's what we have to look forward to.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I don't think they have any shot at getting into power, but I'm really amazed at the penetration of their ideas into the populace. I mean, people are not remembering. We've already fought this battle with communism, socialism, democratic, whatever you want to call it. These are all different flavors of the same ice cream. This is the same stuff that we already fought a battle against. That's what the entire 20th century was basically about, was us fighting that battle. And we almost lost it. I mean, it was very close to communism taking over the entire world, including our own country, back in the 1930s and 1940s. But we were able to defeat it because people understood. They understood economic realities. They understood the idea of supply and demand and financial incentives. And if you make it more expensive for businesses to operate, it's like the book Atlas Shrugged. All the producers, all the creators, all the business people, they'll just leave. They will leave and go somewhere else. And then who's going to give you a job? Then who's going to give you money? Then how are you going to go to McDonald's? McDonald's isn't going to be there anymore. And not just because its CEO is having a little bit of fun on the side with his employees, apparently. This will be real. And, your right to health care, what if the doctors are all gone? I mean, I know if I was a doctor, I'd have to think about going somewhere. These are things you need to think about before you go voting for these maniacs.
And we're back on the Morgan Streetman Show. Just a little public service announcement. If you're planning to go to New York, no more foie gras.
Ooh.
Did you hear about that? I just had
No more what?
foie gras. It hasn't gone into
Fatty
effect
duck
yet.
liver.
Hasn't gone into effect quite yet, Pat George. You can still make a couple trips up there for it. And this happened, I'm not sure exactly when, but the reason is because animal cruelty for the ducks or geese, they're force-fed before they're harvested to make the dish. But those who actually make it say, no, the ducks are treated humanely. They run free, unrestricted, compared to some of those chickens that we eat every day in the supermarket that are confined to single-space cages. But it's just... New York is trying to make things no fun. No foie gras, no fun.
Well, I'll tell you, by the way, the way we treat animals in factory farms is highly, highly disturbing.
Absolutely.
And, with respect to foie gras, I quit eating that years ago myself just because I feel kind of bad for them. I think I do think we mistreat animals, particularly ones that we're going to eat. And, it actually makes me a little bit sad. But dadgum, when I had some foie gras, it was some of the best pate spread on crackers. It's just absolutely delicious. Yeah, it's a French thing. It's a Frenchy thing. So
we see both sides of that.
I kind of see both sides. I see why people like it as a dish, but at the same time, much like veal, I always enjoyed veal at the Italian restaurants. I don't order it anymore.
I had mallard duck last week, and it was phenomenal.
A duck is good.
Mallard.
I had duck too last week, Pat.
Yeah, the breast of the mallard. It was caught in Kentucky. Mm-hmm. Some friends shot it. They said, watch your teeth, because there could be some pellets still in there.
Little lead poisoning for you there with your duck, Pat.
But I never had that. It was so good.
Well, I wanted to mention one other thing because, if you looked at the topics we had prepared for today, you would see that we really didn't get through hardly any of them, and I'm sorry about that. We only have an hour here.
Well, there's 2 more hours coming up. You can stick around.
I will stick around for a little bit and talk with Schreiner about some of these things if he's interested. I wanted to just call people's attention to the fact, though, that the identity of the whistleblower in this whole Ukraine thing has now been revealed. Now, it wasn't somebody that we were thinking it was. It's actually a different person, but you can go out there and you can find out some information about this person. They were basically almost a Democrat operative. I mean, they worked with that Alexandra Chalupa lady who helped, if you know the story in detail, helped set a lot of this Trump-Russia collusion hoax up, and also with some of this Ukraine stuff. And she was Ukrainian. This person was fired from the National Security Council under President Trump for leaking. That was back in 2017. And then the person went back to the CIA, and it is a man. This person worked under James Clapper, worked and traveled with Joe Biden, worked under John Brennan, is a registered Democrat, and served in the Obama administration. And there are many, many, many other facts that really call this person's integrity into question, and it makes this look like a political setup. And that's certainly what it seems to be to me, because we all read the transcript, and as President Trump would say, the transcript was perfecto. It was absolutely perfecto. There was nothing wrong with that transcript. And, frankly, I have to agree. And, Pat, like you and I were even discussing before the show, even if there was a quid pro quo, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. He is the top law enforcement officer in our country. And if he wants to know what laws were broken outside of our country with respect to our last presidential election and with respect to this ongoing coup against him, then he has every right to do that. And he has every right to condition foreign aid on them giving us that law enforcement information. We are not obligated to give them our money like we do to all these countries all around the world. We deal out so many billions of dollars all around the world, including to Ukraine, and we're not obligated to do that. It's not wrong if we make some condition on giving them that money.
What if he said in an airplane on a tarmac, if Trump had done something like that it's happened in the past? Do you remember all that where the money was exchanged for certain things? What if Trump did that?
Well, I mean, look, as far as I'm concerned, he has the right to make any conditions that he wants as long as it's a law enforcement condition. And he wasn't asking anybody to get involved in the election. He's asking for them to investigate something. And remember, that CrowdStrike company that's over there in the Ukraine, they have the DNC server, and they're the only ones that ever examined it. The FBI didn't even examine it. They just took CrowdStrike's report, and by the way, it was a draft report. They took CrowdStrike at their word on what happened to that server. So I'm not even convinced that the story, as it's commonly believed to be, well, this is the truth, our intelligence community's looked into this, everybody's looked at this already. No, they haven't. They took CrowdStrike at their word, and CrowdStrike's got the server in the Ukraine. Why is the DNC server in the Ukraine? I have many, many questions about that. Now, one thing I wanted to do is make sure and get to our Out There segment, and I know we don't have a lot of time for this, so this is one. Luckily, we can kind of deal with this because we've dealt with this issue or this person a bunch in the past, and so you know, hopefully, a lot of the story here. And that is none other than Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein is back in the news because if you remember, Epstein's brother hired Dr. Michael Baden. Now, Dr. Michael Baden is kind of a famous medical pathologist and sort of a medical examiner type guy, and he's an expert witness in a number of different cases. He's been involved with all kinds of stuff from the O.J. Simpson case. Mm-hmm. That's the one probably most of us remember. But if you also remember, he was involved in the Kennedy autopsy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, this guy's been around forever. And, frankly, you might have some question about him. But let's just take this, straight at its word and see what he had to say, because allegedly he observed the autopsy. And he said, listen, there were 3 broken bones in Jeffrey Epstein's neck. And those broken bones do not occur. They don't occur generally in a hanging. They occur in a strangulation because that's the only time you get the kind of force on the neck itself. Remember, a hanging is like a force stretching the neck, not a force compressing the neck. And so a strangulation is more of a force compressing the neck. And we had these 3 bones that were broken. And I think when it includes the hyoid bone and others. And I think when you look at some of the facts that we know about, and he had a great chart. He spent some time on Judge Janine's show talking about this. And if you want to go out there and watch the clip and kind of get some more education about this, but just do the math, okay, on the distance to the floor. First of all, Jeffrey Epstein was about 6 feet tall, right? And if he was to get down on his knees, he was about 4 feet tall on his knees. The bunk beds in that correctional facility that he was in are 5 foot 6 inches tall. That's the top bunk. So he allegedly tied himself off to that top bunk and then went down on his knees to hang himself. The problem with that is, what the length of the hanging, what they call ligature, or it wasn't a rope, but let's just call it a hanging rope. You know what the length of it was? 3 foot 6 inches. So subtract 3 foot 6 inches from 5 foot 6 inches, and what do you get? You get 2 feet, right? But on his knees, he's 4 feet tall. So how did he hang himself? He didn't fall far enough. And by the way, he didn't fall at all. And there'd be no pressure to break those bones in his neck. And this thing is just falling apart all over the place. And we didn't even get to the fact that Trevor Noah asked Hillary Clinton how she killed him. Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard. And if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.